So good evening, friends of Hope Talk, and welcome to our lectionary reflections for this Sunday, the 19th of September, 2021. We are looking at the Sunday called Proper 20, which is also called the 17th Sunday after Pentecost or the 16th Sunday after Trinity Sunday. So you can choose which one you want to do it or call it. Hope Talk Online is a resource that is developed by the LGBT task team of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. Today I'm joined with a task team member, Kabagelo, and I'm joined with a guest who is from the United Reformed Church of Southern Africa, Ashwin Tayson, and they will introduce themselves a little bit later. We are using the Season of Creation resources for our lectionary devotions this week. And we are looking at the World Council of Churches and the booklet that they produced called the Season of Creation. And today, as we begin our time together, I'm going to share with you a profession of faith that was written by Pierre Harling, and it's in the resource book on page 29. And this is how it goes. So I invite you just to, at home, as you prepare the space, to center yourself. And if you want to, you can even join in where the print is bold, or just let the words hold you. We belong to the Creator, whose images we are all made. In God we are breathing. In God we are living. In God we share the life of all creation. We belong to Jesus Christ, the true icon of God and of humanity. In Him, God is breathing. In Him, God is living. Through Him, we are reconciled. We belong to the Holy Spirit, who gives us new life and strengthens our faith. In the Spirit, love is breathing. In the Spirit, truth is living. The breath of God always moves us. We belong to the Holy Trinity, who is one and all in all, and three in one. In God we are all made. In Christ we are all saved. In the Spirit we are all united. Together we belong to the earth, our common home. The earth that is the Lord's, and all that is in it. So as we hold that, I want to share with you our readings for this week. As I said, we are in September the 19th for 2021, Proper 20. And the theme from the World Council of Churches in our sharing is peacemaking as home building. Our readings are Proverbs 31, verses 10 to the end of that chapter and the end of that book. It is Psalm 1. It is James 3, verses 13 to chapter 4, verse 3, and then verses 7 and 8a. And then we have Mark from chapter 9 and reading from verses 30 to 37. And this is one of the arguments that the disciples have on the road and Jesus's response to that argument. So I would like to begin with a discussion on Proverbs 31 and some of the insights that we can gain from that particular verse. Now, as most of us know, I was introduced to Psalm or Proverbs 31 as a way of telling me that I should dress better, sit better, and be a productive woman so that I could attract a good husband. And it was read in a way that was very male centered. And it's for me it's a passage that irks me, and at the same time, in my reading of it this week, I have discovered new contours to the passage itself. So I'm just going to ask Kamogelo to start us off with what his insights are on the passage in front of us.
All right, so friends, I am Kamogelo Monwametsi, and I am joining you all the way from Bryanston Methodist Church. And I'm thankful that one has an opportunity to participate in these life-giving discussions where we can talk together, make ourselves vulnerable on how we come to Scripture, read Scripture, interpret Scripture, and hear what God is saying to us through Scripture. But we do know that not all the times that when we interpret Scripture that we get to hear some of the things that are really helpful and life-giving, depending on which lenses you are reading with. And so when I read Proverbs 31, and it really reminded me of some of the formational stages of my being when I grew up, where one was told that the role of a woman is to be in the kitchen, the role of the woman is to care for the husband. And so there are a lot of instructive dimensions that you see in this text. And it speaks with so much authority to a point that to take it and understand it at face value can easily lead to different forms of oppressive dimensions. And it can easily perpetuate patriarchal domination that we need to be mindful of. And so if we were to read it differently, so if we were to read it in such a way that it does not only speak about what the woman needs to do, but in order to talk about how we as human beings are able to be hospitable, how we as human beings are able to share life together as a community. And really, it reminds me that at some point, my kids asked me, Daddy, why do you always cook for mommy? Daddy, why do you always wash dishes? Why do you even clean? Are you not supposed to be in the garden, working in the garden? So you can easily see that kids are looking at the role of a man that has been now changed to be in the kitchen. And so I do all these sort of things without any struggle, right? I am able to care for my wife. I am able to cook for my family. I am able to wash dishes. I am able to prepare stuff for them. I am able to do the bed for my family. I'm able to change the curtains. But if I were to read Proverbs 31 the way it is, I would certainly not be in a position to do that. So it requires a complete transformation of the mind on how we read it. So I regard Proverbs 31 really as a text that ought to be read from a different gender perspective, that it should not be used to put women in a particular angle and in a particular space, but it allows us as human beings on how best can we serve each other as servants, and not the other being the slave and the other being the master. Yeah, so let me stop there for now.
That's great, Kamogelo. I just want to ask Ashwin to jump in there, and Ashwin's going to first tell us where he's from and what he's up to, and he's not a Methodist, so this is something unusual for us Methodists, that there is wisdom that can come from other denominations. It is true.
Yeah.
So Ashwin, yeah.
Hi folks, I'm Ashwin Thyssen. I'm joining you from Stellenbosch, or just outside of Stellenbosch, where I am currently lecturing at the university, lecturing church history and church law. I must say, being around Methodists, it always provides the opportunity for my heart to be strangely warmed. So I am at home. So yeah, I should probably just mention briefly my interest. So I'm currently I work full time, but part of my job right now is to get my PhD to completion, and my interests are spending time with people, and also just collectively dreaming about a more just world, a world where that is livable, that is life-giving, where our relations are affirming of one another. I quite love the fact that Kamoshelo set the stage so well for me, because I just can now share my thoughts without doing too much hard labor. So thank you. Um, I this passage has always somewhat bothered me because of the gendered how wisdom is sort of gendered in this way, that wisdom is a woman, and this woman is presented in a very in a position of servant, in a very harmful way, but perhaps for women generally, because if we read it, as Kamoshelo said, through patriarchal lenses, then it might not do justice to how we would want the world to look. So I have a problem with a gendered focus of women in a subservient role. I think we need to imagine something better. And I think one of the ways that we could be able to do that is when I read the passage, I see three things present, three roles that wisdom invites us. In this case is Lady Wisdom, but wisdom invites us into fulfilling. The first role is that of a minister, to allow oneself to be a servant of others. I think that if we start seeing it as opposed to seeing Lady Wisdom as a mother, but as a minister, it offers us an opportunity to dream anew how wisdom could inspire us. Another way in which another role that this passage might invite us into is that of a mentor. At some stage, the passage speaks of the relation between wisdom, Lady Wisdom, and children, and perhaps that could offer us this, seeing it as a mentoring role that could invite us to sort of draw more on our relationships with others, and also to get people to take people along with us on the journey, to not only offer our mentoring, but also allow us to be mentored by those who might need our aid. That's the second one. And the third one is that throughout the passage, it makes it very clear that wisdom invites us to be managers of our time, managers of our gifting, to manage well what we have received, to manage it to the aid and help of others around us. So I think by looking at the passage through these three sort of roles, it could invite us to see wisdom as not so much gendered as much as it is an invitation to all genders to draw on what wisdom could offer us as minister, mentor, and manager.
Sure, you gave us a 3-point sermon. Are you sure you're not Methodist? I mean, really, like, I love the insights that both of you have just drawn out of this particular passage. And it ties in really well with some of the stuff that I've been reading. And I've been drawing from three people mainly. So one is Botswanan, so from another country within our connection. Her name is Mapule Kabenelwele. She wrote a doctorate thesis in 2012, and she is now resident in Australia, but she's from Botswana. And Madepwane Masenya. And I will put up these links to their theses on our Facebook page so that you can also just dive in there. And they develop really good insights on the opening line of this particular pericope, which is verse 10, a wife of noble character, who can find? So this wife of noble character is the heading of this particular passage in the NRSV reading, which is what we are reading, the translation that we are reading. In the, I think the NIV, it translates as an excellent wife. So here it is capable wife. And in the King James Version, it translates as virtuous woman. But the actual words in Hebrew are this: Eset Chayil. And Esher or Eset is a woman, and it could be married or unmarried. But because of the use of the word husband or Lord, as it would have been translated in verse 11, it is seen as a married woman. And Chayil. And Chayil is a very interesting word because it is actually a masculine word. It's a word that is normally used to describe the virility, the power, and the agency of men, particularly used to describe their military prowess. So it will be like military force or the might of the kingdom. And there are other words within the passage. So when they talk about the vigorous, and you'll hear it in English as vigorous or girding of the loins as the passage goes on, these are all masculine terms that interrupt a very domesticated female kind of image of Lady Wisdom in this particular passage. And so you get this, being a queer theorist, you get this kind of queering of the understanding of the domestic wife in the passage, but only if you actually take time to really delve into how the words are constructed. So you need to dig a bit. What is interesting is that Eset Chayil is a very honorable title. So it's like a woman of great courage, of virtue, and Chayil is often used to describe the virtuousness of a man in the Hebrew text. And the only other time that it's ever used in the Hebrew Bible is for another wisdom literature book, which is that of Ruth. And Ruth is described before she is married, while she is still a foreigner, as Eset Chayil. And she is named Eset Chayil by Boaz before they even actually have a relationship. So what's really interesting is that the only time a woman gets named Eset Chayil, which is like a really deep, high honor, is when the boundaries of Jewish purity is being blurred in the story of Ruth. And the ideas of woman's worth as married and non-married is being blurred in the story of Ruth and in this particular passage itself. One of the things that stood up for me in this passage was that the woman is not just domesticated. So it's not just about the management of the household for the benefit of the male, but it's rather the agency that this woman has to not only transform the household, but to transform the community that's within that household is within, and actually the redemptive hospitality that is embedded in her actions. So her actions are not just about economic prowess, and it's not just about being a good wife. Her actions are about the complete liberative force that changes the texture of that community. So much so that at the end of this particular pericope, let me see if I can bring it up. Here, verses 31, it says, honor her for all her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Now, in the English, this doesn't come across as such a, it sounds quite placid, but actually it's an injunction. So it's not like, oh, let the praises come. It's more like you must give her honor. And the city gate is really important. It plays a role in Ruth because that's where all the elders gather and make political decisions about the viability of their village. They make economic decisions. They basically hold the public discourse of the place at their heart. And it's basically an instruction to the elders, the instruction to the male elders to give honor to this person. And I personally think that Lady Wisdom here, as a personification of female personification of wisdom, is a revelation of God's heart and God's action in the world as not just masculine, but God's action and love in the world as that which is also feminine and also something that escapes the gender binaries, hence the use of masculine and feminine metaphors within the story. And that actually opens us up to what justice really looks like and what hospitality really looks like. So that's my angle on this. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, very, very interesting angle, Lauren, that you're looking at, particularly that it shows us the other positive side of reading that text. And not only read it in the light of seeking to transform the prevalence of the patriarchal and domineering tones that you hear in the text, but the interpretation that you are offering really gives one a different perspective, on how we can see the image of the woman in a different way, courageous, and what can we learn from that courageous aspect, offering hospitality not only for the household but for the community around. And how do we begin to become hospitable people, and practicing the acts of love, kindness, and mercy, and always, self-emptying, giving my best so that others can have life, sacrificing so that others can receive, and giving of myself to others so that community can become a better place. So it's a very interesting angle that you have depicted there. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I just briefly, I love the fact that the text itself invites us to queer. It's present already. We're just invited to join in the work.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I thought. It's like the text disrupts itself almost. If you allow yourself to drop the preconceptions and the inherited narratives, and just to let the text breathe, as it were, I think it ties in very nicely with the psalm around, the ways of wisdom and the paths of justice that the psalm refers to. Do any of you have anything particular about the psalm that you wish to share? I would use the psalm as a call to worship, perhaps this week, or as a centering prayer before entering into a time of confession, or something like that. But I think for me, the main thrust would be the Proverbs and the Markan passage, I think, if I were to preach. How would you hold this?
So in most, so now I bring my tradition. So in most Reformed churches, we would really not read. Rarely does one read all of the passages. So you just have one text at center stage, and then sort of preach on that. But with regards to the psalm, though, I like immediately sprung up when you read verse 1, how, and I'm here using the language that the WCC has offered us, how peace building is seen as a movement, to not follow the path of the wicked, to not follow the advice of the wicked, to not walk the path of sinners, and not to sit in the council of the ungodly, in the KJV version. how that is sort of seen as, it's not a static thing. I quite like that. That wisdom is a call, in a true sense, a call to worship. It's a call to be on the move, to be people of the way, to not be stationed in a way that does not afford us forward movement. So I think Psalms 1 invites me to think about, where am I going? Who am I going with? Why am I going? I really, this is actually one of my favorite Psalms.
Well, from my side, from my side, really, it is an invitation to understand the significance of why formation in certain beatitudes is important. Why formation in peace building, helping the society to know the existence of God's tranquility. But even that as well, how do our characters play a significant role in ensuring that we achieve the peace that God intended for humanity? And that really depends on how do I see myself? So do I see myself as the blessed tree that bears the fruit, at the right time? Or do I follow, again, I'm going back to the concept of James around the desires. Do I follow the wicked desires? Wicked desires that result ultimately in death of self and death of others. But this psalm invites us to a space where we say, what do we choose? Do we choose to be a community that will bring forth the fruits that build a community, fruit of love, of peace, of humility, of wisdom, honesty, faithfulness? If that is the community that we want to build, really, then we are within the theme that talks about peace building as a home, And if you look at peace as a home, in other words, we see ourselves in the existence of the mystery of this embryo of love, and that peace holds us together. Peace leads us. Peace shapes us. Peace forms our thinking. It forms our perceptions. It forms our thoughts. And that's really what the psalm is inviting us to. And that if we see ourselves in the light of that psalm, then we recognize that we can actually have less of killings of LGBTQI communities, queer people, because we are avoiding this compelling, influential, destructive, wicked desires of seeing other humanity, other human beings hating, wounded, and destroyed. So it's an invitation to a moment of building peace.
I quite love that, Kamokhelo. I was so drawn when you said you framed your thoughts so well, and I then realized, like, love brings forth life, and hatred can only but bring forth death, social death, moral death. Only love is able to sustain life, and I think that is what the psalm is inviting us to. So thank you for sort of holding it in for articulating in such a meaningful way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that it almost like pairs really well with last week's lectionary readings around the idea that generosity creates the potential for more generosity, So it's like hospitality, like this kind of thing, like the tree that yields fruits in the right seasons, the tree that creates the environment for a whole ecosystem of relationships that's bigger than just itself, and yet is itself as well. That creates more of that. And I think the thing that Psalm 1 does to me, and I'm not quite sure what it does to you, but it kind of gives me the sense that this is big stuff, that the movement of love and life and hospitality in the world is so much stronger than the noise of our pathologies, and the way we deform the gifts of life and love and home, and yet at the same time, we can't take away the very intimate and real suffering that it brings about, and the loss of life, the loss of women's lives, the loss of queer lives, the savaging of the earth, the breaking of human connection with the soil, and how brutal that is across all our divides. So I think that's what the psalm holds for me. It's like invitation and challenge.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I know we said we talk about the gospel, but Kamokhelo, because you started speaking about desire and connected it so well with Psalm 1, I thought maybe if it's okay, we could talk about James, because I know you had a particular insight around the use of the word desire or desires in the letter. If that's okay, Ashwin, you good with that?
Yeah.
All right. I'll just pull it up a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to jump in there, Kamokhelo, and just talk about your idea around desire and how it shapes or how it informs how we are shaped.
So, I'm more interested really on how James plays with the logic of his words. Who is wise and understanding among you? So he holds on that thought first, and then moves into giving you some kind of, you need to interrogate yourself more. Let them show it by their good life. So he juxtaposes the understanding of wisdom, that wisdom is actually not what we think it is, but he gives what would be the basic fundamentals and very descriptive ones around what a good life is and how do you access that good life. So already when he talks about understanding and moves into deeds, he has already dealt with the concept around be mindful of the things that you allow to emanate from your heart, things that are not helpful to you. Wisdom comes from heaven. First of all is pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial, and all of that. So he looks at those. And then at the later stage in 4:1, talks about, now that I've given you this pattern around what it means to be a person of wisdom. So if you were to think of the Johannine theology around wisdom, so John's theology sees Jesus Christ as the wisdom, right? So now James puts this wisdom literature and integrates it on helping us to simplify it really. He's not making it too difficult for us. So it comes from heaven. So remember that John's gospel deals with the dualistic forces. He deals with heaven and earth, truth and lies, darkness and light. You know that. And now he holds this together and he says, look at that life. I've told you what it means to be a people of peace. It's only when you have wisdom that comes from heaven. So the incarnation of Christ, so Christ that we embody within us, lives within us and helps us to have this wisdom that leads us to be people of love, people of kindness. We are considerate, sensitive of each other, and we share all those values. But then in verse 4:1, then he moves in an interesting point and says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? So in other words, he's implying that you have failed to live out your wisdom. You have failed, in actual fact, to live out your Christ-like character. And hence you are stuck with these fights and quarrels among you. And where does that come from? When you fail to live out that Christ-like character, then the destructive desires begins to be the compelling factors in your life. They become the influential. They become the influencers. They become the ones that drives you. So violence is driven by desires, all right? Desire to greed, desire to destroy, desire to discriminate. So violence is driven by desires. So desire really holds so much power in our lives. And hence our desires need to be transformed so that they can be aligned with the wisdom that comes from heaven, which is the embodiment of the incarnated Christ. And if our desires have not experienced that part of transformation, so I'm using transformation, trans meaning to cross over, to transcend that which I have recognized to be destructive in my life, and allow formation. In other words, I cross over, I live out, I stay away, I remove myself from all the toxic, destructive patterns of living, and I allow a different formative process of good habitual attitudes to emanate in my life. And so desire really plays a significant role on how we relate with each other. The desire, the lust, the Greek word for lust, the storge, right? Which is actually, the Greeks interpret that as love, by the way, storge, it's love, it's seen as love. So desire, the lust, not really that I love this person, but I just want to use this person. I just want to relieve my sexual desires to this person, right? And that becomes destructive. So I am exploiting humanity. I'm exploiting the other. And that's where Achimbembe talks about experiencing the other, the divine world of the other. That to a point that you are beginning to be considerate, to a sensitive, that I cannot allow the desire of lust to exploit others. All right. So desire we need to be aware of it, on how it influences even our thoughts, our reactions, our interactions with others, and how it can easily lead, if it is not well checked, to broken relationships. Yeah, let me stop there.
Oh. Actually, you want to jump in?
That was so brilliant. That was so brilliant. Brilliant. Goodness, you sent me on so many different trips now. I quite love when passages start with a question, and this is sort of my philosophical bent. Habermas, Hans-Georg Habermas said, the raising of a question is the opening up and keeping open of possibilities. So with this question, James sort of confronts us, who among you has wisdom? And we're like, okay, who amongst us has wisdom? And then then it unravels. But I think God is presented as the source, as the fountain of wisdom, and that this wisdom comes from heaven. So when I then imagine this wisdom, I see it as dew every morning that sort of visits us and comes to us in our aid, and it sort of sets us on the way. Again, that language of being on the way. And then when you were talking about desire, Kamokhela, I was just thinking about how, for me, I see desire as a seed, and the question for me is, what seeds are we planting?
Sure.
Are they healthy seeds? Are they unhealthy seeds? Are they seeds meant for this oil? When you refer to exploiting someone else, exploiting nature, what soil am I planting my seeds in, and are these seeds healthy and conducive, and what fruit will they bear? So those desires that I have and that I'm nourishing, what fruit will those desires bear? But thank you so much for that wonderful exposition.
No, thank you.
Sorry, Tom. Go for it. Go for it.
So I like this idea of seeds. I mean, using that analogy, I mean, it's a brilliant one. That what seeds are we planting? So whenever we allow these desires to manifest, they are falling either on a fertile ground, and what will be the fruits at the end of the day? So it's a beautiful analogy. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So as you were speaking and as I was analyzing James, I kind of drew it together with the Joanne passages, as you so rightly put it. And I took it there because I see the Christ, particularly in the Joanne narratives, as wisdom personified. And I kind of hold it, the Logos made flesh, right? The light in the darkness, and John uses light as knowledge of God, knowledge of the way, right? And darkness as ignorance of it, like being asleep, kind of, And so for me, the Lady Wisdom personifications of Proverbs is infleshed in who Christ is. So it's like the Proverbs 31 passage for me, and of course I've got to dig some more scholarly work to back these ideas up, but my instinctive thing was that Proverbs 31 is Christ, and that the husband, the Lord husband image in Proverbs 31 is not husband. It is the relationship that Israel it has with God. It's not this gendered binary thing only, and so Christ is then the Eset Chayil, and the Chayil here is the agency, as I spoke about it, like it translates as power, as agency, as virility, right? And this power, who has the right, or who has this kind of wisdom in this way, as James would open it up, and it can only be Christ. And so that then James does this whole exposition on what wisdom means and holds up Christ as the model, right? And he's doing this to a community that's in the diaspora, that's in their mind living in absolute chaos and are completely like kind of against the rails, as it were. And instead of asking them to succumb to fear and the infighting that, what happens when you choke agency, drawing on Fanon's work, right? So when you choke your own agency, you start fighting yourself, right? So instead of doing that, instead of entertaining those quarrels, reorientate, transform, right? Become like Christ, who is Lady Wisdom, in a sense. And then, so I think for me, this particular thing then ties in really well with the Markan gospel, because what is it that we always fight about? Power.
Yeah.
Right? Power. So who has control over the other? And we other the other people and the other nature because we need to secure our power, that's how racism works, right? So white supremacy exists because we other blackness, we other brownness, we other indigenousness. And by doing that, we then encase what white supremacy is. We do the same thing with LGP. We define our masculinity and our heteronormativity around the dehumanizing of something else, and we entrench those power dynamics in our relationships and in our economics. And I mean, we could also use Proverbs 31 to even talk about economics, but that's another thing, I think. And I think Jesus in this particular passage hits it on the head for us, for me, anyway. So, I mean, coming back into Galilee from where we picked it up last week, we missed out some stuff. So just for the hearers, so last week we had Peter's confession at Caesarea Philippi. In between Caesarea Philippi's confession and Peter going, "You are the Son of God," right? The transfiguration happens. Jesus casts out, coming after the transfiguration that only happens with Peter and 2 other disciples witnessing it, comes down from the mountain, casts out some demons from a little boy. And then we have this interaction as Jesus moves from the transfiguration further along in Galilee to a place called Capernaum. So in here, we see Jesus wrestling with the church's obsession and the disciples' obsession with power. I want to ask you, friends who are here, what do you think about power and linking it with James and the things that drive us apart and take us into places where our desires lead us into toxic and pathological behavior patterns?
So my day job is that I'm tasked to teach undergraduate students right now and postgraduate students, and those, especially those who are aspiring to be pastors. I'm tasked to teach them church polity. So it is never a good thing to ask a church polity lecturer about power, because in a sense, I influence how they conceive power within their denominations. But I do think that one of my challenges right now is how churches conceive of authority, how we not only conceive of authority, but how we embody the authority, because in a certain sense, clergy people and those who serve the church in various roles, we do receive a mandate from somewhere. And my prayer is that that mandate is from God's self, but that we respond to a call that has been placed in our lives, and how we respond to that call might in time become one that's rooted in abuse. And I think the abuse and exploitation, again, I think it's linked to that whole notion of desire, but the desire for power and the will to power is many times linked to our hesitancy. I think a hesitancy to be true to our first calling as Christians, to be people of the way. Because when we're people of the way, we open ourselves up to change, to reformation, to transformation, to cross over, to go beyond, to transcend. But when the will to power is always fixated on how best can I maintain my present position, so that transformation may not be possible, because through transformation, I would have to recognize it's all the mustard seed that must die in order for something to bring new life. But so I think that is for me, when it comes to churches, I think that is fundamental thing. And in that way, with regards to the Mark passage, that way we show our cause and we show who we truly are. And who we then truly are not the people who would allow ourselves to be lost and to be the servants.
Okay.
And also church polity doesn't really allow us to be the lost, does it? But if we hold church polity to its actual, like how you hold the Torah to its actual intent, it is supposed to serve. It's supposed to help us understand what it means to be a servant to people. Yeah. Come on, you wanted to jump in there and I cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. That's okay. Richard Rohr has this beautiful way of of helping us see how we can talk about empowering power instead of having a negative understanding of power. So Christ had power, we have power, and each and every human being has power. But it is how we construct the use of this power in our minds that matters. And so when we talk about empowering power, it is always the power that emanates from self-kenosis, that I empty myself so that others can have life. So I recognize that I have power. But in my power, I will ensure that I'm going to enable others. I'm going to empower others so that they can have life. And then he talks about the other part of saying, in our failure to recognize that our use of power, if it is not meant to serve, so if we understand power as a tool to serve others, we run the risk of perpetual disconnection from God. And that's where we begin toxicity, because our connectedness with God has been disrupted. And he says, and I want to quote this, and he says, the greatest disease facing humanity right now is our profound and painful sense of disconnection. And that emanates from how we use power, because when we use it to exploit, to disadvantage, to discriminate, to exclude, then we are disconnecting ourselves from the Creator, because the Creator wants us to serve with our abilities. The Creator wants us to give ourselves for others so that others can have life. And I guess it is a question of how do we change our perceptions around power, because it is an existing human dimension. It is there, it exists, but it is how our attitude around it, how we use it, how we help people to understand that it can actually be used to serve others. And hence, at the end of this text of Mark, Jesus talks about whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name, then Jesus changes the nature and the way in which the story outplays itself, and talks about begin to be a welcoming person, begin to be hospitable, begin to be the person who rather chooses to share with others, rather choose to give to others, rather choose to be there for those who are in need of you the most. So I would conclude my contribution by saying, if we're really going to be a community of Christ, building peace in the society, we firstly need to recognize that we have been blessed with this gift of power that we can use for the benefit of humanity. And if it is used well, it becomes an empowering power that can change the entire of humankind. Thank you.
I quite love that, because that reminds me of there's something just so pneumatic about that. I really think that power is the Holy Spirit's, the Spirit's power. And immediately as you were speaking, I was reminded of the text in 1 Timothy 1 verse 7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind, or of self-discipline. And that power should be constructed, linked with an understanding of love and of self-discipline, because in that way, it is not power that is abusive and exploitative, but rather founded on good virtues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you.
That is awesome. Like I also would hone in on the power dynamic here, like what you have said, but I would link it with the Chayil idea, and how normally in the Hebrew text it is referred, well, when it's used with the masculine, it's speaking about masculine power, as in military prowess or virility, and in Proverbs 31, it's taken and it's used as hospitality and creating a new oikos nomos, a new household of God, or a liberative household of God, and how Christ does that here in Mark's gospel. The links I would make with that is, firstly, he enters a house. So that is an important thing, that this dialogue around power happens in a home. So it's like the public, and it kind of plays with me. So like the idea of the public and the domestic. So, you know, the public policies that are done through the Chayil, through the virility of control, domination, and, you know, basically fed from fear and self gratification, that those policies live in the domestic space. They fleshed itself out, and we can see that. So like, you know, the lack of agency that people have to participate in the economy, in the politic, in the social aspects of the world, when it is magnified in the domestic GBV. The fact that most queer violence that has happened because of, you know, like, it's my friend's brother who did this to me, or my friend's, you know, or it's really intimate. So that, but the Chayil that Jesus interrogates here and personifies and incarnates in the Proverbs 31 is the whole idea of the first shall be last, the last shall be first, you know. And I would play on the Greek definition of slave and servant. So when Jesus sits down in the house and he brings the child, in the Greek, the translation is paidon. My Greek is bad. I know I anglicized it too bad, but it's paidon, which means little child, but it also translates as slave. And it's like the slave of slaves, you know, kind of understanding. And it happens in the household. And then Jesus goes, whoever welcomes this paidon, the slave of slaves, in my name, welcomes me. And it's like the Christ places Christ's self in this space of the least of the least. So I think Bell Hooks would say that when you create a space that is welcoming to the least of the least of the least, you create a space for everyone. Yeah. And it's not a paternalistic creating of space where, you know, I'm now grandiosely welcoming this person and giving them a voice. It's more like I am literally emptying self, what you say, kamachelo, creating hospitality that extends to the margins of the margins, so that the margins don't exist anymore, you know. And I don't think the disciples understand this kind of Christology. And if you notice in Mark's gospel, right, every single time Jesus talks about the cross, they have a fight about power. It happens 3 times. So Peter does it, then the disciples do it here, and then they do it again. And each time Jesus brings a child, a paidon, into the conversation, a slave, and says, this is what you hold up. If you welcome the ones that are the least of what your society has welcomed, you know, and how your society works, then you welcome me. And that's what it means to carry the cross. And I think it's something that the church doesn't know how to do well. Society doesn't know how to do well. But I don't think we need to know how to do it well. We just need to be in the way of doing it. Yeah. That would be my passing shots, you know.
I have to be reformed in this moment. And John Calvin said, it is only in the face of I'm roughly quoting him now, but it is only in the face of the oppressed, of the least, that we can encounter God.
Yeah.
So God invites us. Well, the least of the least invites us to encounter God when we recognize them for who they are.
Yeah.
So Wesley says the same thing. It seems like Calvin and Wesley might have, you know, some intersections. Yeah. Wesley does it in, I think, his sermon on basically on visiting the sick. I think it's called On Visiting the Sick. And it says it's only, very badly paraphrased, but it's only in relationship and in life-giving relationship with the least of us that we can live out our holiness. And holiness for Wesley is learning to love God and love others and mirroring that love into the world. That's the only way. And it seems to me that, you know, I think Cone says the same thing, you know. Yeah. Katie Cannon says the same thing. So maybe they should not be in textbooks, but they should be in our church polity, Ashwin. Hey?
Yeah, definitely. I'm hearing sort of echoes of Vuyani Velen.
Yeah. That's true. So any parting shots as we bring this reflection to an end this evening?
Well, my parting shot really would be to our viewers at home and everybody else that Christ is really counting on us to be the people of love, to share amongst ourselves the acts of kindness and mercy and love, to be people who are always demonstrating that peace is at the center of the kingdom agenda, and that we really want to see a non-violent society where each and every human being can live in peace. Women are free, women are not oppressed, they are not going to experience any form of femicide, children are living peacefully, and they can preserve their human dignity, and that the queer and LGBTQI community are able to live in peace. And so that's the society that we're really striving for. And in order for us to have that, it is only when we begin to look deep inside of us and see how Christ's love lives there and how do we live it out to influence those around us. Thank you.
Yeah, so much to agree with there. I think these texts call us and invite us anew and again to recognize that we are all co-laborers, fellow stewards on the way, and that to know that our serving is always, that we are always in service of a community. We're not disassociated. We are involved and invested. And to recognize fundamentally, I think, if I may, we are honorary Methodists, to recognize that the world is indeed our parish.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think my parting shot would be to keep banging that Eset Chayil image. I think I would borrow your thing there, Ashwin, around minister, mentor, and manager, and I would fuse it with Kamahelo's thing around power and desire, and like you know, manager is not the CEO of JP Morgan, but rather the idea of being part of an ecosystem of really intimate, intense relationships with others and with the world and with the planets. And that's how I would, I think, kind of end it. Yeah, and just to say that we are missing a crew member today. Nombulelo Kumalo couldn't join us because of network issues, and she had some really amazing insights to share with us. And I'm really sad that she wasn't able to lend her voice to this. But she will be with us next week, I think. A big thank you to Ashwin for lending us his United Reformed landscape in with our Methodist landscapes. Thank you for taking the time out of a very busy schedule to be a part of this conversation. Ashwin will be joining us also in October as part of a conversation on queer theologies and queer theories. And so we're looking forward to that. A big thanks to Kamoshelo and his busy life at Bryanston. Thank you for your insights and your sharing, friends. I really appreciate it. You want to say goodbye to anybody? Give shout outs to anybody that you...
God bless. We love you. Take care. God love you too.
Yeah, same. I concur. Keep well, folks, and may you enjoy God's blessing.
So friends, we'll catch you on the next Wednesday, looking at another set of lectionary passages in the season of creation. So we look forward to that. Until then, have a wonderful week, and may you know joy in the journey. Goodbye.